When I was a child, especially in primary school, I used to admire the left-handed kids in my class. And I even went home and practiced writing with my left hand, hoping to become left-handed myself. And no matter how much I tried, I wasn't very successful. But back then, I believed that left-handed people were somehow naturally more talented or even smarter. And I had also noticed something. Left-handed people had most likely been forced to learn how to write or eat with their right hand when they were young. I had also noticed something. Left-handed people had most likely been forced to learn how to write or eat with their right hand when they were young. That's why they ended up being left-handed. And I still remember at the first grade when we learned how to read and write for the first time, our teacher told us to hold the pencil with our right hand, calling it the correct hand. And this is still the case in many parts of the world today. It's still common to encourage children to use the proper hand, which means the right hand. The interesting part is that the word right means not only right side, but also correct or good in many languages, and not just in English. So, if being left-handed is supposedly so wrong, why does it exist at all? And this cultural perception isn't unique to one country. For example, in India, the left hand has traditionally been considered unclean, so children are discouraged from writing with it. In several Middle Eastern countries, also include Turkey, the left hand is still viewed as the unclean hand because of the religious belief. And even in France and England, until the mid-20th century, left-handed children were punished with a ruler for using their left hand. So across cultures, left-handedness has long been ignored or suppressed despite being completely natural. Today, about 10% of the world's population is left-handed, and archaeological evidence shows that this ratio has remained the same for roughly 500,000 years. Human remains show signs of left-handedness through difference in arm length, bone density, also through two wear patterns, and the direction of macroscopic tool marks on bones and muscle attachment asymmetries, all physical traits of hand preference. And some antique tools also contain usage marks indicating left hand use. And despite what many think, handedness is not a choice. It's a present before birth and can even be predicted in the womb. So how can handedness be detected before birth? In ultrasound scans, about 90% of the fetuses tuck their right thumb, and fetuses show preference when touching their face, waving, or turning. And early brain asymmetry becomes noticeable as early as 8 to 10 weeks. And the fetus constantly use one hand more than the other during spontaneous movements. All of this shows that handedness emerged as a neurological trait before birth. But if handedness is innate, does that mean it's genetic? And yes and no. Even identical twins with the same genes can have different dominant hands. And this happens just as frequently as it does in any other sibling pair. And still, genetics plays a strong role. The probability of being right or left-handed follows surprisingly consistent patterns based on the parent's dominant hand. And for example, if your father is left-handed but your mother is right-handed, your chance of being left-handed is 70%. And maybe you may ask, why 70%? Because handedness is influenced by many genes working together, not a single left-handed gene. And these genes affect brain asymmetry in different degrees. A left-handed parents contribute some of these variants, increasing the probability but not guaranteeing left-handedness, hence the moderate but elevated 70%. Two right-handed parents have about 10% chance of having left-handed child. And you may ask also why 10%? Because the baseline frequency of left-handedness in the population is already about 10%. And this stable ratio reflects a long-term evolutionary balance shaped by both genetic and environmental factors. So, two right-handed parents still carry some of the genetic variation associated with left-handedness, but at population average levels. Hand preference is like a rolling a die, but your genes determine the probability of each outcome. And all of this suggests suggests that evolution has maintained a small but stable minority of left-handers for a reason. And many theories attempt to explain why left-handedness exists or why most people are right-handed. And some interesting example includes brain asymmetry theory, which is language centers are usually in the left hemisphere, favoring right-handedness. Societies create tools for the right-handed majority, reinforcing right-hand advantage. And sexual selection theory, left-handedness may have been perceived as attractive in certain contexts because it was rare. And neurodevelopment variation theory, which is left-handedness might simply be a natural variation in brain development. But recent mathematical models suggest that the actual 19:10 ratio is the result of balance between competitive and cooperative evolutionary pressures. I personally experienced the advantage of left-handedness even though I'm right-handed. When I first learned table tennis, I practiced it using my left hand to engage the part of my brain controlling it. And for the first time, I witnessed the advantage of left-handed players have. Most of my opponents were right-handed, so they were completely unfamiliar with the left-handed service, and then they found them unusual and difficult to handle. And this effect, which is the advantage of being the minority, is explained by something called negative frequency dependent selection. And the benefits of being left-handed are most obvious in the activities involving opponents, like fighting or competitive sports. And about 50% of the top baseball hitters are left-handed. Why? Because left-handers are rare, and both right and left-handed athletes spend most of their time practicing against right-handed opponents. So when a right-handed player suddenly encounters a left-handed one, they are caught off guard, while the left-hander is already used to facing right-handers. And from an evolutionary perspective, if humans only competed, fought, hunted, and battled, the number of left-handers will increase until the advantage disappears, and eventually half of the population will be left-handed. But human evolution wasn't shaped by competition alone. A cooperation was just as important, and cooperative pressures push the distribution in the opposite direction. In sports like golf, where performance doesn't depend on an opponent, only about 4% of elite players are left-handed. And this demonstrates the broader phenomenon of tool sharing. Throughout the history, tools were made for the right-handed majority, and left-handers struggled with these tools, faced higher accident rates, and performed less efficiently. And in a purely cooperative world, left-handedness will gradually disappear. So, the stable 10% ratio is actually the equilibrium point where both competitive and cooperative forces balance each other. And perhaps the most fascinating part is what these numbers reveal about different populations. Cooperative animal species tend to show much more uniform limb use patterns, and meanwhile competitive hunter-gatherer societies show slightly higher left-handedness rate, and likely because combat and hunting rewarded rare strategies. And these patterns give us interesting clues about early human evolution. Left-handedness may reflect the dual nature of humanity and our need to both cooperate and compete. And the consistent 10% might be a biological marker of this balance, preserved across hundreds of thousands of years. And in other words, the answer to some of these mysteries of human evolution may quite literally be in our hands or in our coffee. It's so delicious. And that's all in this video. And do not forget to like, subscribe, and support me on the Patreon. With love, my friends. With left hands, Shevai.